Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moppin coming at you with another APUSH video. Today we're taking a look at topic 6.3, Westward Expansion, Social and Cultural Development. And in this first video we're going to be focusing in on this very important transitional moment in American history that had, in many respects kind of showing how we've kind of gone from what we had always had as, an opportunity that now seems to be closing. And what I mean by that is the closing of the frontier. Remember, when we talk about American history up through, the most of the 1800s, there's always this sense, and it's a real thing. I mean, it's an economic thing, it's a geographic thing. Obviously, there's political implications, but in many respects, it's most importantly a cultural thing that we identified as being American, in the sense that there was always a new place to go for us to settle, to develop, and with that bringing new opportunities for Americans. And there was always this sense that there was always going to be a frontier. In many respects, we kind of took that for granted because it had been so long a part of the American identity. If you lived, much earlier when America was on the Atlantic coast, there was the Appalachians of the frontier, and then the Ohio River Valley, and then the Mississippi River Valley, and then the Rocky Mountains, and then, the West Coast. And so there was always, generation after generation, a new place, a new frontier that was always moving westward. And that's now seemingly coming to an end. By the time we get to the late 1800s, America, if you look at a map of the United States by 1890, let me kind of come down here. These areas that always seem to have territories on the horizon that we could add to the Union, those territories are becoming states, and there aren't new territories coming in anymore. And by the time you get to 1890, this is a map of the U.S. in 1890, there's only a handful of territories left out in the West. Now, granted also, what had been the Indian Territory for several decades is going to be transitioning into its own territory as well, called Oklahoma. Now, a lot of that is going to be the result of the fact that, hey, guess what? This Indian Territory does actually have a lot of important resources, most importantly, oil. And once that's going to be found, well, that's going to make it much more, easy to snatch it from Native American tribes and turn it into its own future state. But bottom line, even with Oklahoma becoming technically a new territory, what we had kind of defined traditionally as a sense of just keep moving west and these new territories to explore and add to the Union and develop and become new states, it's seemingly gone. And in fact, the Census Bureau in 1890 is going to seem to confirm that by saying that there is no more frontier anymore. And that then begs the question of what is America without a frontier? We've never had that, identity crisis before. But now we're starting to have to think about that. And as the frontier is seemingly evaporating, this is going to provide a very important platform for writer Frederick Jackson Turner. And, in Turner's writings, there's a picture of him right here, he's going to be talking about that when we do define America in our history, in our political, economic, and cultural history, the frontier has promoted American values that we strongly identify with. The ideas including individualism. The idea being is that I can go to the frontier traditionally and I can live my life my way. Be it somebody trying to homestead on their own, my new land, or if you're a religious community like the Mormons, going out to Utah, we're going to go have a place of our own where we can practice our faith freely. That's part of the frontier. The idea of, the frontier being an opportunity to promote new ideas, new ways of solving problems, but also fostering a sense of pragmatism, that you have to be practical, that you have to be able to solve problems rationally to survive. If you're going to make it as a plains farmer, if you're going to make it as a miner, if you're going to be making it in the oil business or the railroad business or whatever, being practical as a frontiersman. But also the idea of promoting democracy. The idea being is that where America goes, so goes democracy. And so where does democracy go now if there are no more frontiers to go to? Now, no, Turner is not going to just be identifying the positives of the frontier and our interactions with the frontier in a solely just positive way. It's also going to be him highlighting the fact that one of the results of our constant quest for, trying to find the frontier and embrace the frontier in our history and our culture and heritage, we have been very wasteful. We have been very wasteful with the resources, damaging to the environment, all right? That we basically go to suck out the resources, be it the oil, the gold, the silver, the copper, the tin, whatever that is, and kind of lay waste to a lot of the environment in the process. That maybe we didn't value the long-term impact of what we are doing in our desire to, get rich, our desire to make it, out on the frontier. And notes, all right, with the frontier seemingly evaporating, the West is not going to have this same identity traditionally as kind of this remote area. This idea that almost, it's almost like, like in today's concept, like out on the moon, like it's this remote, distant, faraway place that, yeah, you can technically get to, but, you might as well be some other world because it's so far away. And it has kind of a sense of a romanticism and mystery to it and, all that kind of stuff. But now that's seemingly kind of going away because the West is not going to be as remote as it used to be as we go through the late 1800s. As you take a look at this map of the United States in the late 1800s, you can see how broadly railroad infrastructure is going to be spreading across the United States, particularly in the West. If you look at this map, and I know it's a little bit hard to read a little bit, but if you look at the green lines here, these were the railroad lines that existed prior to 1870, basically up through the end of the Civil War for the most part. And as you can see here, these were all, the vast majority were in the northeastern quadrant of the United States. Obviously a big reason as to, why America becomes industrialized in the north and why the Union wins the Civil War, yada, yada, yada. But note, in comparison, out west, by the time we get to 1870, there's only one rail line that has been built to the West Coast. That's the Transcontinental Railroad line. That's it, okay? So, by 1870, the West is still pretty remote, but 20 years later, take a look at how many railroad lines will be making their way out west, making their way to Texas, out to the Rocky Mountains, all the way out to the West Coast, particularly California. As more rail lines get added, it takes away from the remoteness of the West, the mystery of the West. That, in other words, the West just becomes another part of the United States. Nothing special inherent, you know what I mean? It's seemingly not as mysterious and wild as Indiana or something like that. And so that's going to beg the question of, well, what is America now if we don't have that rugged frontier anymore? And it is also speaking to the reality of, where we're moving, where we're living, not just more folks moving out west, but really more of the transition from rural areas to urban areas. That, the future of America is not on a western frontier necessarily, but it's now going to be in the urban centers of America, because that is where the economy is going. This is as we're getting into a second, even broader industrial revolution after the Civil War that is going to be creating more and more cities where people are not living in remote areas, rather, in fact, the opposite, crowding into very densely populated areas. And so what then is going to happen, all right? As we lose our frontier, as we lose the opportunity to always have that next shot, I can go somewhere west. I can go somewhere where no one has developed it yet. I could be, on the front end of something new and exciting. As those opportunities seem to be gone, well, then what happens moving forward? If I'm struggling in a factory in New York City, do I have any other options? There's California's already settled. Texas is already settled. Oregon's already settled. Colorado's been settled. Where else do we go? And for some, the concern is, in our lack of a frontier anymore, we might be very well starting to take on attributes of any other westernized country. You know, are we basically going to start to transform into Britain, to France, to Germany, where they also do not have frontiers, where the cities are the center of life, and where we do see a tremendously broad lower working class that doesn't really have opportunities. They're basically wage slaves to industrialists in these big cities. Is that the fate of America? Is that what we're going to have? Are we going to start to have the end of the idea that you can come from nothing and make yourself into a success, that you can take on the new opportunities and make yourself a new man, so to speak? Is that going to be gone? Are we now going to have an entrenched, not royalty, not, royal aristocracy, but an entrenched upper class, wealthy class that if you're not born into, you'll never have a chance to get into? Is that the future of America? That's a concerning issue, okay? So understand that, we're going through this kind of existential crisis as we go through the late 1800s, that we're no longer the land that always has a rugged western frontier that you can always go to as a second chance or a last chance or something like that. That's going away. We're becoming more industrialized. We're becoming more urbanized, not just in the Northeast, but everywhere. And what does that mean for us? Does that mean that we've lost something special in our identity, something special in our culture? So anyhow, some things to keep in mind. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.